What if I told you that the greatest source of your suffering is not outside of you, but lies dormant within you, imprisoned in your own biology, quietly draining your strength, your will, and your very essence? You would laugh, perhaps. You would doubt. But let us go deeper. Not into superstition nor into moralism, but into the human psyche itself, into the unconscious battleground where your potential wrestles with your impulses. The ancients knew this power. The mystics, the warriors, the prophets, they all spoke of it in veiled language. In modern terms, it is called semen retention. But this is not merely about physiology. This is about the transformation of the psyche through the mastery of instinct. In the span of 21 days, you do not simply hold back a fluid, you redirect a force. A force that was once used for reproduction becomes the very engine of rebirth. To understand this transformation, you must first recognize a profound truth. Energy that is not expressed outwardly will inevitably turn inward, and this can either destroy you or transfigure you. The libido, what Freud called the sexual drive, and I call psychic energy, is not limited to sexual expression. When contained, it does not vanish. It seeks another channel, and here lies the secret. In retention, the energy that once dissipated into momentary pleasure now returns to the self. It fuels ambition, heightens focus, intensifies dreams. Your unconscious begins to speak with a new voice. On the first few days, you will feel the battle between the ego and the shadow. The ego cries out in hunger, desperate to maintain its habitual comforts. But the shadow, the dark repressed parts of you, wakens, for you have disturbed its sleep. There may be restlessness, anger, even despair, but these are symptoms of initiation. The psyche resists transformation, for it means the death of the old self. By the 7th day, you may begin to notice something strange. People look at you differently. You stand more upright. Your thoughts are sharper. You are no longer merely reacting to life. You are observing it, shaping it. The energy you once gave away freely now nourishes your inner fire. You begin to feel like a man who has returned from exile to his forgotten kingdom. At day 14, the unconscious begins to realign. Symbols may appear in your dreams. Your intuition sharpens. You begin to sense meanings beneath the surface of things. You are no longer satisfied with surface pleasures. You crave depth, purpose, conquest, not of others, but of your own chaos. This is not repression. This is transmutation. The base metal of impulse is being forged into the gold of will. By the 21st day, a threshold is crossed. You are no longer merely retaining. You are creating. What you withheld now circulates through your nervous system like lightning through wire. The fog in your mind lifts. There is clarity, confidence without arrogance, peace without passivity. You become aware of a higher self, what I have called the archetype of the king, the fully individuated being who does not grovel before instincts but commands them. This is the beginning of sovereignty, not over others, but over the inner empire. The transformation is not magical, it is psychological. You are integrating the fragmented parts of your soul. The boy who sought pleasure is giving way to the man who seeks meaning, and that perhaps is the greatest power of semen retention, not in what it withholds, but in what it awakens. What if I told you that the greatest source of your suffering is not outside of you, but lies dormant within you, imprisoned in your own biology, quietly draining your strength, your will, and your very essence? You would laugh, perhaps. You would doubt. But let us go deeper. Not into superstition, nor into moralism, but into the human psyche itself, into the unconscious battleground where your potential wrestles with your impulses. The ancients knew this power. Your perception sharpens because your inner noise begins to quiet. The compulsive need for stimulation starts to wane. Your nervous system, no longer exhausted by cycles of depletion and guilt, begins to reset. There is a growing calm, not one induced by sedation, but one born from inner command. You are not reacting to impulses, you are recognizing them. And in recognizing them, you weaken their hold. This is also the stage where the body begins to align with the mind. Testosterone levels normalize and may begin to elevate. Not simply in chemical terms, but in the deeper Jungian sense of archetypal activation. Testosterone is not just a hormone, it is symbolic of assertion, of purpose, of will. As this inner force grows, your posture straightens not merely because of biology, but because the psyche is beginning to reclaim dominion over the body. Women may notice. Men may respect or feel uneasy. This is not because of physical appearance alone. It is the energy, the unspoken aura that begins to emanate from you. In Jungian terms, the animus, the masculine aspect of the psyche, begins to embody itself more fully. You are no longer diffused, scattered, fragmented. You are coalescing into something more whole, more potent. Mentally, tasks seem more manageable. The chatter of self-doubt, though not silenced, begins to fade into the background. You begin to glimpse what it means to act from the self rather than the ego. You may feel compelled to clean your space, organize your thoughts, reclaim your time. These are not random urges. They are signs that order is returning to the inner world. A man who regains control of his energy often regains control of his surroundings. The micro reflects the macro, reflects the macro. And then something even more curious begins to happen. You no longer see this practice as deprivation, but as liberation. The hunger fades, not because it has been conquered, but because it has been understood. What you thought was a need was a craving. What you thought was pleasure was sedation. And way was puhish. In this clarity, new desires begin to rise, deeper ones. The desire to build, to lead, to speak truth without flinching. The desire to carve meaning into the stone of your life, not simply chase fleeting sensations that leave you emptier than before. This is when the unconscious begins to trust you. It begins to open doors. It begins to release visions, memories, intuitions. You are being invited inward beyond the surface of your personality, into the deeper caverns of your being where the seeds of your myth lie waiting to be uncovered. At day 14, the unconscious begins to realign. Symbols may appear in your dreams, your intuition sharpens, you begin to sense meanings beneath the surface of things. You are no longer satisfied with surface pleasures, you crave depth, purpose, conquest, not of others, but of your own chaos. This is not repression, this is transmutation. The base metal of impulse is being forged into the gold of will. Around this time, you begin to notice that the energy you've been containing is no longer just circling intention, it's becoming direction. Something shifts internally. Your drive, which once scattered itself across temptations and distractions, now starts to consolidate. You feel a rising pressure, not anxious but vital. It seeks movement, creation, expression. The psyche can no longer tolerate meaningless tasks or superficial conversations. There is an urge to align your outer life with this new inner order that's taking root. Psychologically, this is the beginning of what Jung might call individuation, the slow merging of the conscious ego with the deeper self. What you once thought of as you begins to stretch and grow. A deeper, older voice begins to rise from within, not as words, but as a presence. You don't simply think, you perceive. You don't merely plan, you intuit. This is not about fantasy or escapism. This is the emergence of inner authority. In dreams, archetypes may appear, symbols from myth, animals, strangers with knowing eyes, storms, fires, sacred spaces. These are not hallucinations. They are communications. The unconscious is attempting to guide the ego into integration. It is using the language of symbol and emotion because logic is too slow, too limited, too conditioned to reach these depths. And because you have held onto your vital energy, you now have the psychic strength to decode these messages. There may also be emotional releases. Moments of grief for years wasted in distraction, bursts of anger, your former weakness, sudden waves of joy not tied to any event, but to the sheer fact that you feel alive in a way you had forgotten was possible. These are signs of energy returning to the psyche, life force once lost to mindless habits now reclaiming its rightful place at the center of your being. You may find yourself pulled towards solitude, not as escape, but as resonance. Noise becomes unbearable. The trivial feels like poison. You crave silence, not as a void, but as a mirror. It is in that silence where insights come, not forced, not summoned, but revealed. And in these moments, you begin to realize that semen retention is not about denying desire. It is about reorienting it. You are not closing the door on sexuality. You are opening a door far deeper within it, where sexuality merges with identity, power, meaning. This is also when discipline begins to feel less like a burden and more like a form of worship, not in the religious sense, but as a devotion to a higher order. Yet you begin to see time differently. Waste becomes painful. Focus becomes sacred. Even the way you walk changes. Your movement becomes deliberate. Your eyes hold steady. You are no longer leaking energy through subtle insecurity. You have begun to seal the vessel. And all of this is not because you are trying to project strength, but because you have remembered something ancient within you, a way of being that modern life has tried to suppress through comfort, overstimulation, and endless distraction. and endless distraction. The energy you've retained is not merely sexual, it is existential. It is the foundation of presence. The unconscious feels it, responds to it, and starts shaping your reality accordingly. People react to you differently, not because of charisma, but because something in you now moves with gravity. You carry weight, not just in body but in spirit. By the 21st day, a threshold is crossed. You are no longer merely retaining, you are creating. You are creating. What you withheld now circulates through your nervous system like lightning through wire. The fog in your mind lifts. There is clarity. Confidence without arrogance. Peace without passivity. You become aware of a higher self, what I have called the archetype of the king, the fully individuated being who does not grovel before instincts but commands them. What occurs on the 21st day is not a climax, but a shift in identity. The transformation is not just felt internally, it begins to crystallize. Before this point, you were enduring urges, reconditioning responses, and confronting shadow material. But now, you are no longer merely surviving the process. You are becoming the process. The container has been built, the fire has been lit, and now, the alchemy begins in earnest. The energy that once tempted you toward destruction has been tempered by time, shaped by discipline, and purified by introspection. Now it begins to organize itself into will. Not momentary willpower, the kind used to resist temptation, but enduring will, the kind that reshapes the course of a life. This is the first glimpse of true sovereignty. The self begins to act not as a reaction to the world, but as a source of direction within it. You begin to feel as though your choices carry weight beyond the moment, that your actions ripple through unseen dimensions of your future. At this stage, your body begins to feel like a sacred tool rather than a pleasure instrument. Movements become intentional, breathing deepens, and silence takes on an almost audible texture. There is a resonance between thought and action, between desire and vision. You feel the energetic circuitry of your being has come online. The old pathways, those worn down by indulgence and repetition, are overgrown, replaced by new trails carved by presence, awareness, and internal authority. The nervous system, once dysregulated by constant stimulation and release, begins to settle into coherence. You can feel it in how you respond to challenge. Where once you would flinch, escape, or collapse, now you observe, calculate, and assert. Answer. You are not ruled by impulse. You are informed by instinct, but no longer enslaved to it. This is the emergence of command. Not over others, but over the inner chaos that once dictated your behaviors. Jung spoke often of the integration of opposites, the union of the conscious and unconscious, the masculine and the feminine, the beast and the divine. On this path, semen retention becomes a symbolic and literal act of that integration. It is the conscious embrace of a primal force, not to suppress it, but to elevate it, to marry the wild with the wise. The king archetype rises not from domination, but from mastery, mastery over the internal kingdom first. And it is precisely this inner order that begins to reflect outward. Your voice carries more resonance. Your gaze is unwavering. Your presence alters the emotional climate of a room. What you've retained is not merely physical. It is psychic capital. It fuels your ambitions, sharpens your creativity, deepens your intuition. You begin to speak not from performance, but from essence. Words emerge that feel ancient, yet new, like you are translating the unconscious into sound. Art, strategy, leadership, vision, all begin to flow more freely, not because you are trying harder, but because your channel is clearer. By now, your relationship to time, desire, and even your past has changed. You no longer seek to escape yourself through pleasure. You now confront, contain, and transmute. Where once you chased dopamine, now you pursue meaning. You begin to understand why ancient mystics, warriors, monks, and sages all spoke of energy as sacred, why they protected it, honored it, and used it to pierce the veil between ordinary life and the mythic dimension of existence. In the eyes of others, this may seem like strength. But deeper than strength, what they sense is alignment. You are no longer fractured, no longer swinging between extremes. You have become a conductor of your own force. The psyche no longer cries for discipline. It rests in it. What once felt like sacrifice now feels like structure. The need for constant stimulation falls silent because the mind has remembered how to listen to itself. This is the beginning of sovereignty. Not over others, but over the inner empire. The transformation is not magical. It is psychological. You are integrating the fragmented parts of your soul. The boy who sought pleasure is giving way to the man who seeks meaning. This emergence of sovereignty is not loud. It is not boisterous or self-congratulatory. It is quiet, grounded, and unshakable. It comes from within, not as an idea, not as motivation, but as structure, as order, as the return of the self to the throne. Until now, your inner world was governed by momentary impulses, cravings masquerading as needs, 1,000 conflicting voices, each pulling your attention in a different direction. Now there is silence where chaos once ruled, and from that silence, clarity begins to rise. The psyche, once divided between desire and guilt, between habit and purpose, starts to merge into a unified force. This is what Jung referred to when he spoke of psychological integration, the alignment of the conscious mind with the unconscious, so that the whole of the individual, his instincts, his dreams, his intellect, his intuition, begins to act as one organism rather than a battlefield. You are no longer arguing with yourself. You are no longer negotiating with your lower nature every morning. You are becoming internally sovereign. The boy who once measured his worth by validation, by fleeting pleasures, by how well he could escape discomfort, begins to die. In his place, the man begins to rise, the one who carries responsibility not as a burden but as a sacred task. You start to see that discipline is not about denial, it is about alignment. You do not say a no to the world because you are afraid of it. You say Enoa because you are aiming at something higher, something precise, something only you can bring into existence. Your decisions become less reactive and more rooted in vision. You are not being pushed by fear or pulled by distraction. You are moving from intention. There is a psychological stillness that enters your life. You no longer need to chase. The world begins to bend toward you, not because of magic, but because your energy is no longer scattered. It is focused. It is clean. It is directed. This coherence within you sends out signals to your environment, and that environment begins to respond. Others may not know why they feel different in your presence, why they suddenly lower their voice, why they feel compelled to listen, to explain themselves, or to follow. It is not manipulation. It is magnetism born of inner order. You have become a symbol, even without trying. A man who has wrestled with himself and won not by force, but by understanding. The archetypal king energy begins to manifest, not as domination, but as domination, but as steward. You feel responsible, not in the shallow sense of duties and checklists, but in the deeper sense of being accountable to your potential. Your dreams become bigger, but so does your capacity to pursue them. You begin to attract more responsibility, more weight, and strangely, it feels natural. It feels natural, not because it is easy, but because the part of you that once avoided pressure has been replaced by a part that thrives under it. Your nervous system is no longer frayed. Your gaze is no longer restless. You are no longer living in reaction to your environment. You are shaping it with your presence. This sovereignty is not rigid. It is fluid. It adapts, it adjusts, but it does not kneel. You feel as though you are walking with something ancient beside you. A calm certainty, a subtle awareness that your energy, your choices, your presence, these things now matter beyond yourself. There is a growing sense that the way you carry yourself echoes out into the world, influencing others whether you speak or remain silent. And slowly the inner empire, once a ruin of distraction, temptation, guilt, and confusion, becomes a sanctuary, a place of strategy, of reflection, of power. You no longer seek escape because you have built something within your self-worth inhabiting. The energy you've retained is no longer raw. It has become refined, intentional, integrated. You are no longer managing chaos. You are governing order.